Sorry for the delay, वो कुछ कैमरा का इनका इशू चल रहा था, so we had to start late. So I hope you guys studied and revised, or maybe not, whatever we did yesterday. And ठीक है, तो फिर so basically we'll be doing today and tomorrow also some topics from governance. Then after that maybe 2-3 topics will be left from governance, but most likely we'll be starting from ethics from the next class, theory. Then those 2-3 topics either I or somebody else will take, but they'll be done towards the end since they are not interrelated to what we are doing at the moment. I have done a lot of governance portion before which may be used in the ethics also, right? So that we don't have to repeat the same things again. If there is something from ethics point of view which has to be done in those topics, I'll tell you there itself. But if you will check out the syllabus, जो I think you should do घर जाके कभी तो उसमें you'll realize that गवर्नेंस और एथिक्स में कुछ पोर्शंस ऐसे हैं जो बहुत कॉमन है. ट्रांसपेरेंसी, अकाउंटेबिलिटी, सिटीजन चार्टर, आरटीआई, ये सब एज इट इज़ दिया है. एंड बहुत डिफरेंस नहीं है. लाइक वहाँ पे भी दिल आस्क यू क्वेश्चंस इन दैट फॉर्म ओनली. तो जहाँ जहाँ लाइक आई हैव ऑलरेडी मेंशन्ड, यू कैन मिनिमाइज योर प्रिपरेशन and limit your sources. Do that. If you try to prepare same topic from 3 different places for 3 different papers, it becomes difficult. तो जितना मुझे पता है और जितना मैं पढ़ाऊंगा वहाँ I'll tell you कहाँ कहाँ टॉपिक्स क्लब कर सकते हो, बाकी खुद देख लेना. ऐसे बहुत सारी एरियाज हैं जो मेंस में रेपिटेटिव हैं. लाइक सोशल इश्यूज में भी कुछ कुछ चीज़ें ये हैं जो हम गवर्नेंस में पढ़ेंगे जो कवर हो जाएंगी. हेल्थ, एजुकेशन, वल्नरेबल सेक्शन, ये सब वहाँ पे भी आ जाता है. पॉलिटिकल साइंस ऑप्शनल वालों के लिए बहुत सारी चीज़ें जो ऑप्शनल से एज इट इज़ यूज हो जाएंगी, तो उसको प्रिपेयर मत करना. लाइक पेपर 1 में ये सेक्युलरिज्म, कास्ट इश्यूज, विमेन और ये सारे जो सोशल इश्यूज का मेजर चंक विल बी कवर्ड इन योर ऑप्शनल ओनली इन वेरी डिटेल्ड. ठीक है, तो उसको वहाँ से यूज़ कर लेना. तो बिफोर यू स्टार्ट योर लाइक यू नो प्रॉपर प्रिपरेशन फॉर मेंस, एक बार अपने सारे नोट्स इकट्ठे करके देख लेना कि जिस जिसका मटेरियल जहाँ जहाँ से मिल रहा है उधर से वहीं से चेप लो. ठीक है, don't try to make notes for every topic that is given in the syllabus. Okay, so today we'll start with a new topic. Heading डालो, public policy. So who makes, yeah. अच्छा, yesterday जो उस point में था. See, I told this yesterday also that economic interest of the government is, for example, government is eyeing on a key acquisition. ठीक है, कोई private company को acquire करना चाह रही है, या एक government, if there is some government PSU which is to be disinvested. Okay, so if you disclose the information of such, things, they might lead to speculation in the stock market and may lead to economic loss for the government, right? If the information is already disclosed, probably they might not get the kind of rates they were expecting. So any fact or any information which if disclosed can somewhere or somehow affect the economic interest of the government. Okay, so that will not be done. If for example government has planned to give out licenses for a particular mineral, if this thing has, this news comes out in the market, then there may be a some kind of a collusion that might happen, or people might find alternatives or some kind of a speculation. तो किसी भी way में economic interest of the government, but then again it's a vague term. The government can use it as per its whims and fancies, but I think you got the point. ठीक है, तो public policy कौन बनाता है government में, मतलब country में? Yes, मोस्टली एग्जीक्यूटिव एक्शन से बनती हैं. ठीक है, मिनिस्ट्रीज बनाती हैं, गवर्नमेंट बनाती है, ब्यूरोक्रेसी प्लेज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट रोल. एम आई ऑडिबल? है ना? तो ब्यूरोक्रेसी प्लेज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट रोल इन गिविंग गुड इनपुट्स, इन contributing towards the whole policy making process, but ultimately it's the domain of the political class. ठीक है, तो whoever the elected government is, they have the right to run the government, they have the right to run the country, and it comes under their purview what kind of policies or what kind of a policy framework would be required for smooth functioning of the nation. Okay, so इसके अंदर 4 स्टेप हैं. policy, public policy, whenever you make a policy, there are 4 steps. उसको लिख लो एक बार. First step is policy initiation. Policy initiation. Policy initiation. Second is policy formulation. Formulation. Third is policy implementation. Policy implementation. And fourth is policy evaluation. Evaluation. ठीक है. So as the name suggests, it's pretty obvious that पहले तो आप एक policy को initiate करोगे. There will be certain inputs from the society. There will be certain inputs from the elected members. There will be certain inputs from the bureaucracy and the political class themselves. And ये सारे inputs बन के towards an existing problem or towards a futuristic problem that could occur or a solution for the future. ये सारी चीजें club होके somewhere or the other will be the basis for initiating a policy. All right. Then the second step would be to formulate this policy. अब आपको basic idea तो पता लग गया है, but again then there are a lot of internal things which have to be seen, and then this policy is formulated right from the skeleton structure to ultimately when the policy takes its shape and size. ठीक है. Then the third step is policy implementation. अब policy सोच भी ली, बन भी गई, अब implement करनी है. तो implementation is also again a tough task. Because policy formulate तो आपने cabin में बैठ के कर ली, but implement करनी है तो 1.3 billion population के सामने करनी है, right? So there are a lot of problems which we'll be discussing, and finally, like we saw that there is a feedback mechanism of almost everything, right? जैसे कल उसमें भी हमने citizen charter and everything में पढ़ा था. Ultimately, the government is also providing services, right? So whatever this policy is meant to do, it may or may not achieve its desired goals. It may or may not achieve whatever intention was behind the formulation of this policy. It may be excellent, it may be just okay, or it may not just fulfill whatever the demand was, and people are still unsatisfied or people are highly happy. So to know all these things, we need a good feedback mechanism, and for that we need to evaluate the policy, how well it did. If it was good, then it can be used as a model policy for other formulations. If it was bad, then probably it can be amended, or there can be changes which have to be brought in so that it is suitable to the needs of different sections of the society. Alright, तो अब इसमें थोड़ा बहुत लिखो. पहला है policy initiation. Policy initiation. इसमें लिखो. It sets the policy agenda. It sets the policy agenda by defining the problems and the areas which need attention. By defining the problems and the areas which need attention. ठीक है. अब इसमें लिखो problems which are pertaining to this stage. Policy initiation में क्या problems आती हैं? Just small brief points I'll give. First is problem in identifying issues. Second, problem in identifying issues. First point था, यार AC नहीं चल रहा क्या? एक बार बोलना उसको. Just call somebody, वहाँ कोई बाहर बैठा है तो. ठीक है. तो second point is poor agenda setting. इसी के अंदर ही poor agenda setting. तो basically इसका मतलब ये है that maybe you had thought of a plan, or the whole agenda was not able to conform to what the whole idea behind the policy making was. तो poor agenda setting हो गया. Third point इसी के अंदर जो problem area है, lack of lack of civil society organizations, and NGOs, lack of civil society organizations, comma NGOs, lack of civil society organizations, comma NGOs, and proper communication channels, ठीक है. तो see, government के पास भी to initiate a policy they need some response from the people and the civil societies who are working in that area, right? अब बहुत बार ऐसा होता है किसी एक particular area में there are not many civil society organizations or NGOs who are trying to work for the benefit or fight for the cause of that particular domain. उस केस में गवर्नमेंट के पास भी अच्छे इनपुट्स नहीं आएंगे तो पॉलिसी इनिशिएट ही नहीं होती है, तो थोड़ा स्लो हो जाता है वो प्रोसेस. ऐसा नहीं है कि अल्टीमेटली पॉलिसी नहीं बनेगी, बट जब तक परेशानी बहुत ज़्यादा नहीं बढ़ जाती टिल दैट पॉइंट द पॉलिसी इज नॉट इनिशिएटेड. दैट इज अ प्रॉब्लम. एक पॉइंट और लिखो, स्टेटस कोइस्ट अप्रोच. स्टेटस कोइस्ट अप्रोच followed by the executive is also a problem. क्या होता है स्टेटस को? हाँ, जो चल रहा है उसे चलने दो, ठीक है. लाइक वी डिस्कस यस्टरडे ऑल्सो, चेंज को हमेशा ऑपोजिशन मिलता है, ठीक है. सो पॉलिसी इनिशिएट करोगे तो और 10 चक्कर होंगे. सो दिस ऑफन रिटेलिएशन फ्रॉम द साइड ऑफ ब्यूरोक्रेसी. क्या हो गया? हाँ, अच्छा, एसी की प्रॉब्लम हो रही है ना यार. वो फिर नहीं रहे, चल नहीं रहा है क्या एसी? वो ये सिंक सारे चल रहे हैं. फैन चला दो. हाँ, आपके पास तो है, मेरे पास तो वो भी नहीं है यार. बीच में एक बार उसको बुला के ले आओ फिर से. क्या कर रहे हैं लोग? थैंक यू. ठीक है, सेकेंड पॉइंट लिखो. विच वन? स्टेटस क्वेस्ट अप्रोच. Yeah, see, so as I told you that a lot of inputs are given by NGOs, civil society organizations. If say there's a small area, something like self-help group or even a smaller domain of some micro industry which the government is probably not that aware of, जिसके लिए एक independent department नहीं exist करता and it comes under a big ministry, they might not know the problems which are pertaining or which are specific to that sector. So often these civil society organizations and NGOs and other such public spirited citizens also, if I may say so, they सब बोल रहे हैं गर्मी बहुत हो गई है. तो in that case these people come forward and they give their inputs in form of written petitions or they act as a pressure group, they lobby for that particular policy. So then the initiation process begins. ठीक है, तो अगर ये चीज़ें नहीं होंगी, like we had discussed in the NGO topic, that if everything is good in the country, if there is no problem, we will never need NGOs or civil society organizations, right? So similarly, अगर problem identify करने वाले लोग नहीं होंगे तो initiate करने में भी problem आती है. I hope you got the point. Pardon? Yeah, poor agenda setting is it can be multiple things. See, basically you know what the problem is, but the planning is not correct. Okay, the agenda that you are setting probably lacks information, or it has over ambitious targets or extremely unsatisfactory targets. So ultimately you will not achieve what the policy has desired. Okay, ultimate final जो हमारा जो policy हम चाह रहे हैं that it reaches the people or the society, it will not happen if your agenda setting is not right. Like I tell you कि आप syllabus अच्छे से पढ़ो. If you don't know what the syllabus is asking, or if you don't know that where to prepare from, how to make notes for what topic, then you cannot expect that you'll top mains, right? तो वो initial stage बड़ी important है, जो agenda setting जिसे कहते हैं हम, ठीक है? Second point is policy formulation. Policy formulation. It is the main stage. It is the main stage where the policy assumes shape and size. It is the main stage where policy assumes shape and size. It is majorly done by executive and bureaucracy. It is majorly done by executive and bureaucracy. ठीक है? अब इसमें क्या प्रॉब्लम्स हैं वो लिख लो इस स्टेज में. First is policies are mostly incremental in nature. Incremental, incremental, incremental in nature. That is minor changes or mere add-ons. Minor changes or mere add-ons, ADDONS, add-ons to existing projects and policies. ठीक है, तो ये पॉइंट समझ आया? Like we have observed this also with every successive government. जब change आता है तो policies में बहुत drastic change नहीं आता, right? It is mostly incremental. If they have thought of some policy which probably they could not implement or they could not formulate, the next government will do it with minor changes. Or if already there is a, जब नरेगा था वो मनरेगा बन गया, right? थोड़े बहुत minor changes कर दिए, जो भी salary structure change करना था, number of days बढ़ाने कम करने थे, उस type के policy changes हैं. It is very rare that a new policy right from the scratch is started, okay? Because when you make policies like these and you declare them in all your public documents and your, the achievements of the government, it is a problem because these policies were probably not intended by you and they were just minor changes just to, show that we have made a policy. So incremental change है, new policies नहीं आती ज़्यादा. Second point. Most of the policies are driven by political slash electoral inclinations. Which are also referred to as populist policies. Populism term सुना है? Doing things for the sake of people or public or appreciation or, short term gains के लिए कोई चीज की जाए. So we have seen this in the past. I don't need to explain you that often the government policies and the government initiatives have a very strong political and electoral inclination. अगर उससे वोट बैंक नहीं बढ़ेगा तो क्या ही फायदा है वो करने का, ठीक है? That is the general mindset that a lot of political parties who come into power have. And this is not right. That's not how policies should be framed. Policies may benefit a small section of the society, right? If tomorrow I am making a policy जो एक छोटी community को favor करता है, which probably that community might not have more than say 5 lakh people altogether, okay? But that may not be in the interest or probably not liked by the other majority sections of the society. but is that a basis on why I should make a policy or why I should not make the policy? Because the vote bank will be affected. That's not how things should be done, right? अभी ethics में पढ़ेंगे आप एक Immanuel Kant, deontology स्कूल पढ़ेंगे, बहुत ही interesting है, जिसमें intention की बात होती है कि whether the intention is right to do a particular act or not. So यहाँ पे भी वही चीज़ है, with what intention are you trying to make the policy, whether it is for populist means like elections and all, or whether it is truly to benefit the society and the country at large. ठीक है? तो इसमें हाँ क्या लिखा था last? हाँ, also refer to populist. हाँ, such policies हाँ continuation में लिखो, such policies are often preferred. Such policies are often preferred over rational policies. ठीक है? Next point, third. Lack of inclusivity. INCLUSIVITY. Lack of inclusivity. ठीक है? तो इसमें लिखो governments often neglect inputs from minority groups and other weaker sections of the society, which makes such policies lack inclusivity, which makes such policies lack inclusivity. ठीक है? It is often seen that policies which mainly benefit the influential quotes में लिखना, which benefits the influential corporate class is preferred over the interest of common man. ठीक है? तो इसमें see what happens is at times the government can have inclination towards a certain section of the society, right? वो कहते हैं ना सूट बूट की सरकार and all that. तो especially if you have a government which is in majority, right? आपके पास हाउस में majority है, अगर आपको मनी बिल पास कराना है, आपको राज्यसभा की भी अप्रूवल की कोई जरूरत नहीं है. So in such a scenario, it doesn't really matter whether any particular community is benefiting or not, as long as you have the numbers, you can do whatever you want to do, right? तो उस cases में आपकी policies may lack inclusivity. That is not the only case. Otherwise also you may try to benefit certain section of the society or certain elite, or maybe for that matter a certain community or a group of people, and the policy is not inclusive. When I say inclusive, it is not favoring each and every person, or probably each and every major and minor community. It is not for the benefit of, it is only for the benefit of, or mostly for the benefit of the elites or the influential people or the corporate class, and not for the common man, a person who is involved in agriculture, a person who is a daily wage laborer. ऐसे लोगों को भी affect करनी चाहिए policy, okay? When such policies are coming forward, then probably we can say that now they are also being integrated into mainstream. Now the policy has inclusivity, and the whole idea of egalitarianism that we have, कि egalitarian society बनाएंगे, we'll try to reduce income inequality, and we'll try to increase the standard of living for almost everybody. That will come when the policies start to have inclusivity. Okay? I hope you understand this now.
Sir, this point must not be an agenda part.
Which point?
This one, inclusivity one. Because अगर आप वहाँ पे ही आप सोच लोगे, मुझे इन sections को करना है और उसी हिसाब से आप formulate करेंगे ना.
नहीं, see, initiation तो see that can be there also, but then otherwise आपको inclusivity तो formulation stage पे देखनी होगी ना. Your target audience is probably decided a little later. पहले तो ठीक है, एक problem है, you identify the problem in the first phase, ठीक है. In the formulation stage you will probably, जैसे अगर आप ये food security act कर रहे हो या मनरेगा कर रहे हो, ठीक है, तो पहले तो problem decide करोगे ना कि this is the problem, okay, इनको daily wage jobs नहीं मिल रही हैं या इनको subsidized खाना नहीं मिल रहा है, that is your problem, ठीक है. You know that mostly it is for poor or mostly it is for this or I didn't, हाँ, but major जो stratification है वो तो formulation stage पे ही होगा ना. So it is a drawback of formulation stage, not initiation stage. नहीं, वहाँ पे भी है obviously, उधर भी when you start a policy you have to make sure that it is, हाँ, that it is, you know, catering to the needs of everybody. But if you have to pinpoint, अगर आपको accountability set करनी है या आपको blame करना है तो formulation stage पे आप करोगे, initiation stage पे नहीं करोगे. तो ये point will hold more relevance here. ठीक है. Third point लिखूं. Third मतलब अब ये next stage है, policy implementation पे आ जाते हैं. IMF and World Bank. Okay, that may be a small thing, right? I mean, we can. Funds come for some of the projects from IMF World Bank. हमारी पूरी economy, हमारा पूरा infrastructure IMF और World Bank से थोड़ी चल रहा है. हम Which highway are you talking about? NHAI क्या कर रहा है फिर अगर सारे पैसे IMF दे रहा है? That is wrong information. कुछ projects हैं जो World Bank fund कर रहा है, mostly water related. Asian Development Bank कर रहा है highway projects, but ये majority chunk नहीं है. And these projects are not on their terms and conditions. ऐसा नहीं है like जो pre-91 era में होता था that we have to follow whatever they do because we are taking almost 90% 100% loan from them and probably we may not be in a condition to repay them back. यहाँ we are in a condition to repay them back. It is mostly a soft loan, but interest पे होता है तो उनको भी फायदा हो रहा है. ऐसा नहीं है that they are just lending money on 0% interest rate, right? And India is a sovereign country. It's an independent country. We cannot work as per the whims and fancies of okay, unofficially होता है थोड़ा बहुत ये लोग प्रेशराइज करते हैं यूएस गवर्नमेंट को भी हमारी एनवायरमेंटल पॉलिसीज जो भी हैं उसमें कुछ ना कुछ हाथ रहता है. वी कैनॉट डिनाई, बट ऑन पेपर देयर इज नथिंग लाइक because of IMF or because of these multilateral institutions our policy making gets affected. Maybe if say we are talking about जो भी SDRs or India's, you know, we want to increase our voting share and all that in IMF और उसके regarding कोई policy बन रही है, ये economic policy जो हमारे foreign funding को affect करता है या foreign loans को affect करता है, उसमें we may obviously look into जो भी conditions या जो भी इनके points हैं because we have to take funding from them. But otherwise our infrastructure policies or other railway policies or other aviation, highway जो भी sector है will not be mainly determined by these multilateral institutions. They also attract foreign funds. You think that the development that is being done in the NDMC area or MCD has foreign fundings? In general also, no, that's not the reason. On paper and ground realities become different because when we formulate policies on paper वो बहुत utopian होती है. If I make a policy for Karol Bagh, जैसे वो Delhi master plan का पीछे issue चल रहा था, ठीक है, master plan 2020 and all. So what we aim at initially कि हाँ ठीक है, we want to manage the traffic also, we don't want that the people living in that area should also be affected, but what we don't keep in account is the shops which are already running unregistered, जो illegal चीजें already चल रही हैं, जो already हो रही हैं, हमें नहीं पता because we are sitting in our AC वाले rooms and we are making policies. Ground realities become different. Then there comes the element of corruption. नीचे की authorities ने किसी को allow कर दिया पैसे लेके, किसी को नहीं किया हुआ. And then when the problem becomes big is when you analyze it. अब आप analyze कर रहे हो Delhi master plan को, अब आपको पता है residential area में भी commercial shops exist कर रही हैं, but आप कुछ खास कर नहीं सकते. The moment you do, आप उनको abolish करते हो या आप उनको license ले लेते हो, they approach the courts, they approach the Delhi government, फिर Delhi government और union government असल में आ जाती है. So then these things start to happen and then Supreme Court has to come in. Again Supreme Court has no idea of ground realities. वो अपना बैठ के verdict देते हैं that this is ideally wrong. So ground realities और policy making में difference आता है, but that is not because of multilateral institutions की funding. You go and check कि कितनी funding है जो local और national projects में बाहर से आ रही हैं. Hardly. National highway या water वाले projects हैं जो water highways and all, उसमें World Bank पैसे दे रहा है. बहुत कम ऐसे हैं. Not the ones जो जितने आपके major infrastructure projects हैं जो railways कर रहा है, NHAI कर रहा है, that is mostly through their own funding. नहीं तो hybrid annuity और ये जो 3 मॉडल्स आए हैं इनकी कोई जरूरत ही नहीं होती अगर हमें बाहर से पैसे मिल रहे थे तो. I think we should talk about this later. ठीक है, कहाँ पे थे यार? Policy implementation. हाँ, third point था ये policy implementation. So this is the major arena. This is the major arena, ARENA, of bureaucracy. Of bureaucracy, as it plays an important role. As it plays an important role in implementing these policies. As it plays an important role in implementing these policies on grassroots level. On grassroots level. As it plays an important role in implementing these policies on grassroots level. ठीक है, अब पॉलिसी इंप्लीमेंटेशन में क्या प्रॉब्लम्स हो सकती हैं, बताओ, कोई गेस मारो. क्या? यस, अ वेरी रिजिड एटीट्यूड. करेक्ट. यस, एग्जीक्यूशन इश्यूज. करेक्ट. करप्शन. यस, टेकिंग एडवांटेज ऑफ एम्बिग्विटी, वेगनेस. करप्शन में पार्ट आ जाएगा वो भी. Okay, fine. Awareness issues are there. Identification of beneficiaries. Yes, very good.
Cumbersome process of the government. Some people are like that it will take a lot of time to implement there.
Okay. Geographical. हाँ, okay हो सकता है, but वो formulation में सोचना चाहिए ना इनको कि if you are setting up a railway track in north east तो आप उसी में problem आ जाएगा. ठीक है. ठीक है, लिख लो थोड़े बहुत पॉइंट्स. यू आर अवेयर ऑफ सम ऑफ देम. फर्स्ट यू कैन राइट रिजिड ब्यूरोक्रेसी. रिजिड ब्यूरोक्रेसी. lack of funds. Second, lack of funds in the later stages. Lack of funds in the later stages. Third, excessive political interference. Excessive political interference. Fourth, delay caused due to environmental clearances. Delay caused due to environmental clearances. और फिफ्थ लिखो fear of 3C. CBC, CBI और कौन सा है तीसरा C? हाँ, CIC का क्या fear है यार? कुछ fear नहीं है. सी CAG, राइट, कैग, इन तीनों से डरते हैं ऑफिसर्स. Fear of 3 C's by the bureaucracy. CVC, Central Vigilance Commission. CBI तो पता ही है, क्राइम ब्यूरो ऑफ इन्वेस्टिगेशन, और कैग, कंट्रोलर ऑडिटर जनरल ऑफ इंडिया. ओके, सो ये पॉइंट क्या है कि सी ऑफन व्हाट हैपेंस इज, even if an officer really wants to do something good, like he had mentioned that there are certain gray areas in the policy where the discretion is somewhere attributed to the officer in charge. उस केस में क्या होता है, often at the higher level the problem which is being faced by the honest bureaucrats is if they take certain decision, tomorrow there might be somebody who did not like that or certain section of the political class who might bring it against him using these three things. So if you actively try to do something good, maybe which is not there in the policy, or you twist the policy a little to benefit, you know, the people at large, there is a problem that CVC might come after you, vigilance case ban jayega कि आपने ऐसा क्यों किया, maybe you had, you know, personal interest or you are a part of some bigger scam or something. CBI तो लगा ही रहता है पीछे आधे bureaucrats के, and CAG अपनी report में कुछ negative डाल देगा after seeing all these things, that since you did not have the authority, or if you had the authority and there were no clear guidelines, how did you do this step, whether you had any personal inclination, personal motives, then they'll try to find out that उस कंपनी के आगे आउटसोर्स्ड में किसी कंपनी में आपका एक रिलेटिव निकल आया, ठीक है, and then they'll say you had your personal motives. So bureaucrats are fearful, they do not want to invite unnecessarily trouble because of these three agencies. So at times वो भी implementation में थोड़ा सा, you know, back foot पे रहते हैं कि ठीक है भाई, नहीं हो रहा तो छोड़ दो, ज़्यादा इसमें इन्वॉल्व मत हो, अपना कोई पर्सनल बेनिफिट तो हो नहीं रहा है, नहीं भी बनेगा कॉलोनी में स्कूल तो हमारे बच्चे तो जा ही रहे हैं ना एनीवेज. सो दैट्स देयर होल आइडिया. किसी का लॉस होगा, वी ट्राइड आवर बेस्ट बट वी विल नॉट पुश इट बियॉन्ड दिस पॉइंट दैट इट कम्स बैक टू अस इन अ नेगेटिव साइकिल. ठीक है, DOPT का भी यही रूल है. अभी आज के टाइम बहुत सारे लोग अपने सर्विस एलोकेशन में प्रॉब्लम है, कैडर में प्रॉब्लम है, even in the slightest of the thing they are extremely rigid, very rigid, because they know अगर एक का भी थोड़ा सा कर दिया और कल को उसके नीचे वाले ने सुप्रीम कोर्ट में केस कर दिया कि इसको ये कैडर कैसे अलॉट हो गया, इसको वो कैडर कैसे अलॉट हो गया, इसको ये सर्विस कैसे होगी, तो अल्टीमेटली जो जॉइंट सेक्रेटरी, अंडर सेक्रेटरी, डिप्टी सेक्रेटरी, ये लाइन से जाएंगे घर. ठीक है, डिस्पाइट इन बेचारों की अपनी कोई गलती नहीं थी, they probably, you know, thought that it was a genuine case. So unless and until it is not good on paper, they don't do it. बहुत rigid है, and it is because of the whole bureaucratic setup also, and because, you know, it is needed. I feel that at some time this rigidity is needed, because in our country अगर आपने थोड़ा सा भी laxity दिया, अगर हल्का सा भी एक को दे दिया ना, तो आपका हाथ ही पकड़ लेंगे फिर वो. Then they won't leave. अच्छा सर चलो ठीक है, आपने स्टेट दे दिया, अब एक काम करो IAS भी दे ही दो, क्या ही फर्क पड़ रहा है, एक ही रैंक तो नीचे हूँ मैं. So these things happen. तो थोड़ा सा rigid attitude at times is necessary, but not in the things जहाँ flexibility prefer होनी चाहिए. अब लास्ट स्टेप पे आ जाओ, पॉलिसी इवैल्यूएशन. पॉलिसी इवैल्यूएशन, ठीक है. पॉलिसी इवैल्यूएशन में क्या है, अब 3 स्टेप हो गए. ठीक है, क्या क्या थे 3 स्टेप? ठीक है, अब बचा फीडबैक मैकेनिज्म, दैट इज द इवैल्यूएशन ऑफ द पॉलिसी, व्हिच इज द फाइनल स्टेज and the most important stage and also the most neglected stage. ठीक है, because often हमारा काम यहाँ पे खत्म हो जाता है. It is similar to a test series that you write. ठीक है, आपने टेस्ट सीरीज ज्वाइन की, इनिशिएट कर दिया, आपने जाके टेस्ट दे भी दिया, ठीक है, फॉर्मुलेट कर दिया, उसके बाद आप घर ले भी आए सक्सेसफुली सॉल्यूशंस, उसके इम्प्लीमेंट भी कंप्लीट हो गया, बट अब जो सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट काम करना था उसको एनालाइज करने का वो आपने किया नहीं, और वही सवाल घूम फिर के आपको मिले UPPCS में, MPPCS में और शायद UPSC में भी. एंड देन यू थॉट हाँ यार ये देखा तो था, ऑप्शंस भी सेम आ गए हैं, बट इसका बी था कि सी था, याद नहीं आ रहा. ठीक है, इट हैपेंस एंड इट विल हैपन. द बिगेस्ट मिस्टेक दैट वी डू इन प्रीलिम्स इज दैट वी डोंट सॉल्व टेस्ट पेपर्स डिस्पाइट द फैक्ट वी नो दैट इट इज इंपॉर्टेंट. हर बंदे को पता है कि ये 2-3 टेस्ट सीरीज हैं जो बहुत अच्छी है, और ये भी पता है कि ये क्लेम करती हैं कि 80 क्वेश्चन आ रहे हैं हर साल हमारी टेस्ट सीरीज से, 8 भी आ रहे हो तब भी बहुत है. ठीक है, 80 तो चलो ज़्यादा हो गया, बट येट वी डोंट डू इट. इट स्टिल टेक्स अस 2-3 अटेम्प्ट्स टू फाइनली से ओके दिस ईयर तो कर ही लेते हैं. एंड देन व्हेन यू डू एंड देन यू अल्टीमेटली क्लियर प्रीलिम्स, not blaming your luck, family, dhobi, gardener, everybody. Then you come this side of the podium and then you say test series is very important. ठीक है, तो evaluation भी वैसा ही है. It is the most important stage. Unless आपको feedback पता ही नहीं चला, आपने बैठ के पूरी story create की, आप for yourself or your officers, you thought you did a fantastic job and everything was good, but जिनके लिए वो policy intended थी वो तो हुई नहीं. Similarly, reservation में भी often it is said that the target audience is not benefiting. जिनके लिए the whole idea was to bring them into mainstream, I don't think, or maybe a lot of people don't think that they are being benefited. ठीक है, most of those people are not even aware about the whole idea of reservation. So these things, the targeting part of the policy, that has to be improved. ठीक है, तो evaluation में लिखो reviewing the impact of policy, reviewing the impact of policy via reviewing the impact of policy via proper feedback from citizens and civil society organizations. Reviewing the impact of policy via proper feedback from citizens and civil society organizations. इसी में second point लिखो identifying the gap between the vision bracket में लिखो goals, between vision bracket में लिखो goals and output bracket में लिखो results achieved. एक सेकेंड, okay. So the last point was identifying the gaps between vision in bracket goals and output in bracket results achieved. Okay, so you can make a diagram like this, that this was the vision envisaged, whatever it was, and the outcome or the result of the policy ultimately, it was this, and this was the gap in the policy. Okay, these were the things that have to be worked upon. 1, 2, 3, jo bhi tha, these were the things, right? So this is the gap that has to be filled by incrementing or probably making changes in these policies. So there was probably, it was decided to make, say, 3 flyovers connecting these 2 regions, but ultimately those flyovers, out of those 3 only 1 came up, and probably those 2 which were actually very necessary, or the ones which were to divert the traffic and the real problems, were not ultimately made. So you have to analyze between what the vision or the goal was of the policy and ultimately what results it has achieved, and whether it is satisfying the people, it is satisfying the section of the society that it was aimed to benefit or not, and then we work again on that policy. Okay? So this brings us to one more small topic in this only. You might have heard this term, policy paralysis. A lot of time it comes in the news, in Yojana, magazines. Often in the news channels also we hear saying that policy paralysis has what made India come down into all these lists and stuff like that, right? So put the heading, policy paralysis. See, policy evaluations happens, but again the thing is, It's mostly on paper, right? The bureaucrats will only give inputs. Okay, we think that we could have done these things better. It is often not from the whole grassroots level. Yeah, the bottom up approach that should have been followed in policy evaluation, that does not happen. That is the problem. Yeah. That helps in evaluation. Yeah, that helps in evaluation. Okay, so what is policy paralysis? Someone can tell us. Okay, yes, somewhat. The drawbacks in the policies.
when it is not going in the direction in which it was intended to. It has reached some bottleneck. As a result, we are not able to pull through.
Yes. So which actually leads to kind of paralysis. A paralysis is administrative paralysis, a paralysis in terms of the economy growing, right? So it obstructs the growth of the country. That is the basic idea about policy paralysis. Write something about it. थोड़ा सा लिख लो. It is the failure. It is the failure. It is the failure to initiate, formulate, and implement the policy. So on all three stages, if we are stopping somewhere or the other, or there is some obstruction, it will ultimately lead to policy paralysis. Second point in this, it leads to a huge cost. It leads to a huge cost due to delay. Full stop. As per Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, MOSPI कहते हैं इसे. As per Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, MOSPI, rupees 1.7 lakh crore, have been wasted, have been lost till now. Alright, so say for example, there was a huge infrastructure or a plant which had to be set up in some area. The money for that was released, the people for that was hired, the management came, somewhat the infrastructure started to be created, but all of a sudden the land acquisition for most of the area was not given, or it was cancelled, or it was delayed for say 4 years. Now what happens in such a situation? People are getting paid for 4 years who were hired, but there is no output that is being generated from these industries. The resources had been acquired, maybe the value has been constantly diminishing from them, right? The loan that was, taken up by these corporates or by these PSUs for that matter, now the rate of interest started to increase, and they obviously increased the time limit for payback of these loans. Again the interest started to increase. So there is a lot of economic losses. The moment the policy is not acted or it not functions the way it should have been or the way it was planned to be, monetary losses start to come up, right? जो whole NPA issue है, the infrastructure companies, what they say is that our work has been stopped because say the toll money was not finalized between NHAI and these private corporates or the infrastructure companies, or maybe they did not have the majority stakes in that, or land acquisition. What happens in all these infrastructure highway projects, say the whole land acquisition doesn't happen in one stretch, okay? What happens is they'll be giving them land for say 100 kilometers, they'll work on that. Then they'll again allot them land for say 50 kilometers and they'll work on that, because it is difficult to give clearances and allot the land in one go. But what happens is, if they finished 100 kilometers, now the entire machinery, entire manpower, everybody is waiting for that 50 kilometer of land acquisition. At times that doesn't happen, and wo aage ka 100 mil gaya, and they start to work on that 100 kilometers. So this has happened recently, one of the cases of Soma Group and NHAI. Now they have 100 kilometers done, the other 100 kilometers is done. In between there is a 50 kilometer patch which has not been acquired, and they cannot start toll collection, and the company is facing huge loss and ultimately bankruptcy and insolvency code. Okay? So these things happen. So we are done with this topic. These were the 4 broad stages of policies. You may not get a direct question on them, but you should be aware on how the policy should be formulated. One more topic which we had left before, which we should do now, is accountability. Heading dalo, accountability. Give the heading, accountability. So what is accountability here? We'll discuss abhi. See, the provision is there. Actually, this is informal, right? The civil societies and the NGOs, the government can't really approach them. It is bottom to top which happens, but Gram Panchayats are often approached, and there is a proper feedback mechanism from Gram Panchayats over what kind of success that these schemes or these policies which are meant to be did. The DM's office, there are several institutions which do give feedback. Okay, different state level ministries will give feedback. There are parliamentary committees who post or put up questions over the success of these things. After the committee has posted a question, the ministry will, even if till now they had not thought about it or not done some research work, they will specifically do research in those time limits. Like 15 days or 20 days is usually given by the parliamentary committee for the ministry to answer. Now in these 20 days or this 1 month, they'll again do research of that area and give the feedback. So it's mostly reactive, and it should, ideally it should have been proactive. Okay. Accountability, yes, anybody can define what accountability is.
Normative answerability of any organization. When there is a normative answerability of any organization, what other organization or people at large?
Okay, fair enough. Anyone else?
So held responsible for something?
Yes. Obviously, you can hold somebody accountable if you have given that person some kind of responsibility, right? But then, what did you say? But then that is responsibility, right? थोड़ा सा difference है responsibility and accountability के बीच में. Anyone else? ठीक है, somewhat you have, that is the basic idea. Write down the definition for this. It is the obligation. It is the obligation of those holding power It is the obligation of those holding power, P-O-W-E-R, power, to take cognizance, for their behavior and action. Or you can write to take responsibility for their behavior and action. To take responsibility for their behavior and action, and state the reasons for the same. Okay, so responsibility is basically something which has been given to me, or I am responsible for a certain act. Okay, for example, the DM in the district is responsible for the functioning of the administrative procedures and almost everything. The SP may be specifically the in charge for law and order, right? That is the responsibility that has been given to them. Because of the virtue of the responsibility that they have, they can be held accountable, right? If say the 4 of these people are managing the district, okay, and there is no definite responsibility that I have said that district number 1 or the sub-district 1 he is handling, sub-district 2 she is handling, 3 he is handling, 4 he is handling, then I can target them. Okay, now since I have defined clear-cut responsibilities, I can hold them accountable. I can say that sub-district 1 had a flood recently, what did you do? Otherwise, if these 4 people are managing, tomorrow when some problem arises, I can't hold each of them accountable, right? Because the responsibility was not clearly defined. So responsibility when given, only then you can hold some person or some organization or institution accountable. This is the relation between responsibility and accountability. We'll discuss more on that. Between transparency transparency is a way to attain accountability, right? So if I am not transparent in my functioning or in the way I perform my duties, you cannot actually hold me accountable, right? If you do not know that how this allocation of this coal block was done, you don't know. There is nothing in the newspapers, there is no press release, there is no information from the side of the government. You just know that these 4 people, they got the, different share in the coal block. So you cannot blame the government. On what basis you will do that? So unless the mechanism is transparent, accountability cannot be there. Okay, so transparency is a means to achieve the end, which is accountability. That is the relation between transparency and accountability. Responsibility we've already discussed. Ab types of accountability likh lo. Write the types of accountability. First one is fiscal accountability. Fiscal, F-I-S-C-A-L, fiscal accountability. इसमें लिखो scrutiny of fiscal or monetary transactions. Scrutiny of fiscal or monetary transactions to ensure whether the expenditure is legally made or not. Whether the expenditure is legally made or not. It aims to achieve financial transparency. It aims to achieve financial transparency. ठीक है? So fiscal accountability, you might have understood that when an authority or a government organization or probably an individual who has some discretion or decision making power can be made accountable for the kind of monetary allocations or the financial decisions that he has taken. That were they viable? Were they authorized? Did he have the power to make those transactions? Were they done legally? Were they done as per the process that was sought? Okay, so these things are happening. Basically, the whole economic aspect is checked in the financial accountability. Any particular institution that checks financial accountability? SEBI does it for, or CAG, CAG, the basic purpose of CAG and Public Account Committee, PAC, is to check the financial scrutiny of different government organizations. They are independent auditors. The entire Indian Audit and Account Services has this job only, to ensure fiscal accountability in the functioning of the government. Alright, second. Yeah, you can write examples. Second is process accountability. Process accountability. It ensures whether the stipulated procedure, stipulated, S-T-I-P-U-L-A-T-E-D, stipulated procedure is followed or not. Alright. So there is a certain procedure or a certain task or a certain process through which the things have to be done, right? So if that process is not followed, again accountability becomes an issue, right? So if, like, there is a recent tussle between the IAS officers and the IPS officers of UP cadre, right? Because there is a process that has to be followed. If a SHO has to be transferred in UP, the permission has to be officially granted by the DM of the district, which is actually very sad. But an SP or the officer of the SSP rank, if he decides to transfer certain SHOs or a single SHO, he has to obtain permission from the DM. That is the process. Now recently in one of the cases that happened, I am not sure, I think in Ghaziabad, where the SSP had posted or transferred some of the SHOs without consulting the DM. Recently it had happened in UP that now written consultations were not required, but yet verbal conformity had to be ensured of the DM. So this is a process that has to be followed. If you are not following the process, then again accountability becomes an issue, because there is certain responsibility or task that is envisaged for you and certain task or responsibility envisaged for the other authority. So if the process is not being followed as per the way it should be, then leakages start to happen. Then corruption might seep in, other problems might come in. Okay, so process accountability becomes very important to check whether the right process. This process could be anything. Process to disburse money, process to hire people. So if, for example, for even class 4 employees, if there is no recruitment that happened and suddenly 20 class 4 employees came in or class 3 employees came in just because of a letter of a member of parliament or the chairman of the public sector organization or the secretary without any process being followed. There is a set procedure to hire people for any level, right? There has to be notification that has to be released. There has to be certain qualifications that have to be, possessed by that individual who is joining. There has to be certain medical criteria that has to be fulfilled. So the whole process accountability also becomes very important. Third, social accountability. Social accountability. Okay, now social accountability is probably a little informal type of accountability, but it is the most important accountability. It is the accountability which the elected representatives or the bureaucrats have towards the masses or the citizens that they are serving, right? So that is a different kind of an accountability and the most important one. So for example, if I have promised some kind of social infrastructure that has to come up in the form of hospitals, in the form of educational institutions, in the form of aviation, maybe an airport or a railway station or anything for that matter. Now I am accountable to the people that I have made promises, to the society or to the section of that society who I have promised or who have made me responsible with this power that I can do that for them, right? And the major role that is being played in this social accountability, how can you ensure this social accountability? How can you ensure social accountability? Who will help you in that? Civil society organizations, NGOs, Gram Sabha, a bottom-up approach is followed, right? So again, this also has the same thing, whether there was a vision or aim and the delivered services, there is a gap. And that gap has to be fulfilled by social accountability through the same feedback mechanism. So write something in this. It is a demand-driven, bottom-up, it is a demand-driven, bottom-up concept of accountability. It is a demand-driven, bottom-up concept of accountability which ensures answerability, of power holders, to stakeholders, via citizen engagement, ठीक है? So it is demand driven, it is bottom up, and it ensures the answerability of those in power, that is the political class, to the stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders here? People, the citizens, okay? So they are the stakeholders. So whether you are satisfying the needs and the demands of the stakeholders or not. Second point is Meliko. Write the second point. The state is answerable to citizens for lack of social infrastructure, 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 social infrastructure for lack of social infrastructure and basic amenities. It includes the gaps. Between the promised. It includes the gaps between the promised goods and services. Versus the outcome of such initiatives. Next point. Versus the outcome of such initiatives. Next point. Civil societies and Gram Sabha. Play an important role in ensuring social accountability via social audit. ठीक है. Now this brings us to what is social audit. Next heading डालो, social audit. Social audit में please write audit of government policies and programs along with the delivery of services by the beneficiaries within bracket citizens and other stakeholders. Gram Sabha is empowered to conduct social audit. Gram Sabha is empowered to conduct social audit to identify issues and discrepancies. Okay, so social audit is basically a type of audit which is not done by a government institution like CAG and other auditors that are appointed by the CAG or some other ministry. It is done by the people themselves. Okay, and Gram Sabha is the channel on how or the way they can do it. So it is a direct audit by the people of the government or the people who are in charge in effecting their day-to-day lives. Okay, the policies that are governing them. And obviously the nodal agency here becomes Gram Sabha, which takes inputs from these people, from NGO, civil society, again the DM office. So these things become very important here, right? So there are certain conditions which are important for social audit, without which social audit cannot take place. तो इसमें थोड़ा सा लिखो, essential conditions for social audit. First point, capacity building of Gram Sabha. Capacity building of Gram Sabha. Second point, sharing of information with beneficiaries, and citizens. Sharing of information with beneficiaries and citizens. Third point, active participation. Active participation by civil society organizations, NGOs and citizens, Okay, so although these 3 points are self-explanatory, but obviously if we give such an important role to the Gram Sabha, capacity building is important. What is capacity building? बहुत जगह we have heard this term in a number of places. What is capacity building? No, not giving them power. Yes, giving them the resources or making them equipped to do a certain task. So if we say that we need to do capacity building of a certain section of the society or capacity building of few people, that capacity building could be for students in terms of education, capacity building of workers in terms of imparting them a skill, okay. Capacity building of bureaucrats could be by training them in the respective areas that they have to probably use in their administrative procedures in future. So when we talk about capacity building, these are big terms that you have to often use in your essays and answers. Your capacity building, rights-based approach, civil society. You have to write all these things in your answers. Specifically, these things which we are studying will really help you in your essay also, okay. There will be at least one or two essays which will be governance related. There you can use all this knowledge that you have been gaining here, right. So Gram Sabha capacity building is very important. So you teach them or you tell them what exactly they have to look for, how they have to conduct the audit, what are they aiming when they are conducting the audit, what exactly has to be evaluated, how it has to be done. So basically some kind of education regarding the audit procedure is being done for the Gram Sabha. Sharing of information, obviously it is again a very important point. Unless you share the information with the people, the same thing, transparency is not there, no audit formally or informally can be done. And again, without active participation by the citizenry and the civil societies, no audit can be taken place. If there is no want among the Gram Sabha or the people to audit, they are like, okay, whatever is happening, what kind of policies are there, whether it benefits us or it does not benefit us, we don't give a damn, okay. If you have that kind of an attitude, obviously it cannot function. So there are certain issues also with social audit. We'll write one word each. Issues with social audit. First point, upper caste domination. Upper caste domination. Upper caste domination. Second point, male domination. Male domination. Third is illiteracy. Illiteracy. Fourth is bureaucratic rigidity. Bureaucratic rigidity. Okay, again these 4 points are self-explanatory. Whenever something has to happen in a rural area or maybe in the grassroots level, the whole idea of caste comes into picture, okay. And upper caste, they try to dominate the lower castes in doing such things, and they feel that it is their prerogative, despite they might be directly elected or not. Male domination, again patriarchal society, we know that male domination is prevalent. Illiteracy, now when you don't have the basic knowledge, you cannot even sign on a document, how can we expect you to evaluate the policies of the government? Okay, it would be a big joke. Then bureaucrats, again the bureaucratic rigidity, specifically the ones who are in the state service or the block development officer or the tehsildar or the lower level bureaucracy, that is all even more rigid. I mean, in fact they are the ones who are the actual elites. If you actually go and meet with an IAS officer, IPS, IFS, most of them are not that rigid. Some of them are, I agree, but a lot of them would probably agree to your problem or would probably listen to what your problem is, because they have gone through the same procedure. They are rational people who have been educated sufficiently. But at times the problem lies in the lower bureaucracy and the rigid attitude. Now you go and you tell them, okay, this is the problem, they might beat you and send you home. Okay? So that rigid attitude of bureaucracy has to change. Now, why do we need accountability? We have discussed so much that this type of accountability, that type of accountability, transparency का भी relation discuss कर लिया. So, in brief, we will write why is there a need for accountability. Give the heading need for accountability. Yes. Need for accountability. बताओ. Very good. Power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Okay. Very good. Good governance. Very good. Anyone else? Action needs to growth. But how does that relate with accountability? Hmm? Trust building. Yes, the government enjoys a lot of legitimacy. Correct. Okay. लिख लो इसमें 4-5 points.
to have the citizen develop informed consent opinion.
But that is more important with transparency, right? Accountability may indirectly probably, but not a direct consequence. Yeah, yeah, tell me. So, checks and balances, correct? To strengthen democracy, that is valid in every case. To increase efficiency, correct? ठीक है, almost everything is covered. I'll just summarize it. Write it down. It brings transparency. It brings transparency in functioning of the government. It brings transparency in the functioning of the government. Second point, it enhances the legitimacy of the government. It enhances the legitimacy of the government. Third point, accountability is a quintessential, QUINT, quintessential precondition for good governance. The next point, it prevents the misuse and abuse of power. Okay, next point, it increases the credibility and trust of citizens for the government. Sorry, it increases the credibility and trust of the government. It increases the credibility and trust of the government in the eyes of the people. ठीक है, तो most of the points are self-explanatory. Good governance के लिए obviously it is essential. Transparency obviously is a precondition for accountability and vice versa. Misuse and abuse of power. Legitimacy. Okay, often we say that a government is not legitimate. It is not legitimate if it is functioning on its own, if there is no transparency, no accountability. If, for example, I have brought in 10 people who will be running the country tomorrow who are not directly elected, who have not come through a process of election altogether. It is almost similar to a government who is functioning without absolute knowledge of the people, right? You don't know what the government is up to, you don't know what they are doing, there is no responsibility, there is no transparency, and obviously then there is no accountability also. then such a government cannot be called as a legitimate government, especially in a democracy like India or in general a democracy. A government to enjoy legitimacy has to be accountable to the stakeholders, has to be accountable to the people who have brought that government to power. Okay? So you get need for accountability. Now the last topic is how to ensure accountability. Now this is an important question. This can come in governance or maybe in ethics also. How to ensure accountability? Yes, please. Anyone? We have discussed a lot of points directly or indirectly. Almost the same things now. Yeah, administrative procedure. RTI, okay. Transparency. Anything else? Digitization, okay. Administrative procedure only. Changes, yeah. Pardon? Nodal agency to look after all this, okay. Look after accountability. How can an agency? But that's a very big task, no? That has to be done by several authorities, not just one. Gram Sabha is also doing it. Hmm? How? Anything else? Yeah, that's okay. Empowering them. ज़्यादा ही हो जाएगा फिर तो. Okay, so there are 3-4 basic things, just write down. The most important no one said. First is fixing responsibility. Fixing responsibility. Write down in this, fixing responsibility. Defining clear roles. Defining clear roles. Defining clear roles is important as diffusion of accountability happens if there is no clear division of responsibility. If there is no clear division of responsibility. Full stop. Unless clear cut roles are assigned, individuals responsible or accountable for a certain act cannot be identified. For example, DM of a district is responsible for the smooth functioning of that district. And for any issue in the district, he or she will be held accountable. He or she, that is the DM, will be held accountable. Citizen charter is also another way of fixing responsibilities, right? So I hope this point is clear. If you have not defined responsibilities clearly, or if you have not defined clear-cut roles for every individual in that organization or every organization in a particular sector, then diffusion of responsibility takes place. Like if there are 5 agencies which are involved in financing agricultural funds, right? There may be 5, Mudra is doing, NABARD, this, that, 5 agencies, right? Now when ultimately there are no funds reaching, farmers are committing suicide, if there is no clear-cut responsibility, okay, this agency is only for financing, this agency is for refinancing, this agency is for providing only insurances, this is for maybe just a nodal agency or regulatory body, then you can pinpoint that this was the mistake and this is the person or this is the organization. First, you can pinpoint on the organization that the organization responsible was this or accountable. You can hold them accountable. And then within that organization, since you have again clearly defined who is supposed to do what, you can hold that individual accountable. But for that, it is very important to define clear-cut responsibilities. You know, nobody's here. Yes, evolution of power, devolution of power. But in devolution, there has to be clear cut. I mean, even if you're not devolving power, the power is with one individual. At least that one individual should be there, right? There is a lot of power vested in the DM, and there's a lot of headache also which comes with that, because he'll be held accountable for all of that because he has been given that responsibility. Okay. Exactly. This is what I was about to say. That everybody's property is nobody's responsibility. The same thing. So you can't hold any person accountable, right? Second point, administrative procedures, heading A. The heading is administrative procedures. Within this, right, make clear rules, make clear rules, make clear rules and regulations, make clear rules and regulations for accountability, make clear rules and regulations for accountability, and laws should be as objective as possible, so that they reduce discretion, Example, code of conduct. ठीक है. अब administrative procedures, if we streamline the administrative procedures, like a lot of you had said that the person held responsible should be there is a lot of red tapeism. So if the procedure is streamlined, if there are no gray areas, if there is a clear-cut procedure that has to be followed, then accountability is better off, right? The administrative procedures could also include e-governance. It includes reduction of manual interface, right? The problem of corruption arises whenever there is too much human interface. If you reduce that human interface and you automate things, you streamline the procedure, then obviously the accountability will increase, right? So whatever hiccups or whatever problems are there in the administrative procedures, that should be streamlined. The whole issue of crony capitalism, red tapeism, all these things can be reduced by streamlining these administrative procedures. So first we discussed about the fixing of responsibility. Second is streamlining of the administrative procedures. Third is information disclosure. Information disclosure. This will bring transparency. This will bring transparency and highlight the major drawbacks and issues in the governance. Okay, so as you had mentioned, RTI would come under this only, information disclosure. So transparency is important for accountability, we have discussed. How can transparency be ensured? By things like RTI, right? So RTI, and I mean again that reactive proactive disclosure you are all aware of. if there is transparency or if there is information disclosure. We have seen in the past that a lot of scams which had happened came to surface, like 2G, CWG and all these things. So broadly you have understood fixing responsibility, administrative procedure, information disclosure. There is one more point, public consultation. Fourth, public consultation. Consultation, consultation, consultation. ठीक है, इसमें प्लीज राइट, इफ पब्लिक इज कंसल्टेड, if public is consulted on important issues, if public is consulted on important issues, such a government will be more accountable towards the citizens. Full stop. Feedback is a mechanism of generating accountability. Feedback is a mechanism of generating accountability. Feedback is a mechanism of generating accountability by pointing out the shortcomings. Now you can write an example. The role of media during demonetization. The role of the media during demonetization, when it held the government accountable, for the lack of preparedness, all right. So it is very obvious that if I consult you in all the actions that I take or in all the decisions that I aim to take in the future, I will, as an institution or as an individual or an organization, enjoy more accountability. Okay, I'll be more accountable towards my stakeholders, the people who are vesting their confidence and their resources in me. Okay, and public consultation, if anything is taken up by public consultation, if it is via public opinion, a vote, or whatever is done by a public consultation will definitely enjoy more accountability from the side of the government. Like in case of media, again becomes a channel for this a medium for this public consultation, right? Now, whatever the government policies are conveyed by the media to the people, whatever the response of the people is conveyed by the media to the government in a certain sense, right? The example that I have given, during demonetization, the government was held accountable, maybe not for its policy action of demonetization, but definitely for the lack of their preparedness. There were no ATMs which were dispensing cash, or there were very few of them. There were people who died standing in the queues. There was so much problems that was faced by the citizens, and the government was held accountable. And this was mainly done by a public consultation, which was done by the route of media. Okay, so basically these are four things, four broad areas, which I feel, or maybe you can add on some points to it if you feel, they cover most of the things there are four different points, different domains, where you can add on one or two areas under these points, these subheadings only, on how to increase accountability. Can you be a little louder? Yeah, the Whistleblower Act is again regarding that. We'll be doing Whistleblower Act in detail. We'll do it in ethics. Okay. So there were in fact some amendments which were proposed, if you are referring to that, to weaken the whole whistleblower. So we'll do that. That obviously has a lot to do with the government being made accountable. Okay, so we are done with this topic. Now we were supposed to start a big topic of civil services, but yeah, anyone? but I feel that there is less time, so we'll do a smaller topic. Corruption. Heading down. Corruption. तो corruption क्या है? Most of us know, we have faced, given bribes, maybe not taken at this stage. So yes, anyone who can define it or express whatever they feel about this term. Yeah.
Corruption is a sort of virus in the government or any system which degrades the system and stops it for and decreases its efficiency, stops the direction of work in which it was intended for.
Okay. Anyone else? Yeah. Misuse of power for personal gains. Okay. Willful disobedience for personal gains may not even include corruption. It can, but maybe I willfully disobey to not take a transfer because my wife is serving in the same district. Okay, and that may not have anything to do with corruption. Yes. Huh? Okay. पता नहीं. To use the loopholes to your own advantage. Okay. These are maybe the implications of corruption that most of you are saying, right? So write something about it. Often the things which we know very well are most difficult to define or express. That is a problem, right? Nobody will probably bother to study the topic corruption. Like corruption though we know. We have been doing it also. Giving also bribes. इसमें क्या है? Or what is the big thing in corruption? We know the solution also. सबको हटा दो, right? So write something about corruption. As per World Bank, as per World Bank, as per World Bank, corruption is the use of public resources. Corruption is the use of public resources. Corruption is the use of public resources for private/personal ends. Private or personal ends. For private or personal ends. ठीक है? Next line. Second ARC. Second ARC report has given a formula for corruption. ठीक है? Yeah, so corruption, as by second ARC, they have given a very nice formula for it, which is actually very true also if you analyze it. It is monopoly plus secrecy plus discretion minus accountability. Summarizes corruption, you know, the true essence. अब इसे याद कैसे रखोगे? This will reach with you till home. I used to remember it by MSD, which everybody knows, minus A. Okay. So monopoly, secrecy, discretion minus accountability is a good recipe for making corruption. ठीक है? So write down monopoly, monopoly of state, secrecy of government in decision making, monopoly of state, secrecy of government in decision making, discretion of officials, discretion of officials, and lack of accountability. And lack of accountability makes for a makes for the perfect recipe for corruption. Okay, so the monopoly of the state, when the state is the only institution, when did we see this monopoly phase? Pre 91 LPG era, before the LPG reforms, the whole license Raj, Inspector Raj, okay, there was complete monopoly. The state was into most of the sectors, and even in the sectors where state was not there, it had the complete authority or autonomy to decide the means of production, to decide the cost, to decide how they will function through the whole process of licensing. So that is the monopoly, and at that point of time there was huge corruption in several of the sectors. Then secrecy. Whenever there is secrecy, that we had discussed, that is lack of transparency. If you don't know how I am doing the resource allocation, if you don't know how UPSC is allotting marks, if you don't know, we still don't know how UPSC allots marks. Lekin if you don't know that how a certain decision has been taken, what was the mechanism, what was the procedure that was followed, you will not be able, that kind of secrecy will always lead to corruption, okay. Corruption may not always be the corruption that you think of, that somebody is getting paid and somebody is not getting, somebody is paying the money and somebody is taking it. Corruption could be in a lot of ways. Taking gifts or taking things in kind, or probably quid pro quo also to a certain extent could be claimed as corruption, right? If I am doing a completely illegal thing for some certain political master so that he appoints me as PA when he becomes minister, or he appoints me in a plum posting, is also corruption. Even though I am not taking any monetary gains, I am getting somebody else some monetary gains, okay. That is also a form of corruption. The whole idea of corruption, that you visualize a man sitting behind a window taking money and the certain person is giving it under the table, or probably a policeman taking 200 rupee for a 100 rupee challan, okay, that is not the only form of corruption. A person demanding 10 iPhones or lavish Diwali gifts, all these things are also a form of corruption. We will come on to this in ethics, that what kind of gifts you are entitled to, after which you will be very disappointed. Some of you may not even fill the form next year. Okay, so moving on, the causes of corruption. Batao, what are the causes of corruption? Ignorance. Who said? Ignorance towards. Yeah, so basically we don't pay much attention whether it's happening or not. Less salary, really? After the 7th pay commission, do you think they don't have enough money to satisfy their needs? But only their greeds. Yeah. Batao. Yes, वो आएंगे उस point पे. There is no empathetic anger towards corruption. That's a good point. I didn't. Not proceed step by step. I am not understanding your point. Okay, so not following the procedure. Okay. Delinquency. Okay. Anything else? Lack of knowledge about corruption. Constitution.
The lack of knowledge, like people they don't know कि ये illegal money ले रहे हैं या they are.
Okay, वो transparency में ही आ जाएगा. Low moral values. Okay, it's in our blood. Very good. Lack of strict laws. Very good. Enforcement issues, illiteracy. ठीक है, roughly most of the points are covered. We'll just try to club them in a more mains like answer format. Okay, अभी आप जो आंसर दे रहे हो, it is formatted in a more state service like mains exam. Now we'll convert it into a UPSC answer. See, it is mostly attributed to third world countries, but we cannot say that first world. I mean, a lot of developed nations also in Europe and all, they have corruption, but the kind of corruption is different. No, lobbying is actually legal also in several places. So you cannot call corruption in areas where lobbying is legal, but the corruption is different. Okay, she's asking a question that is corruption only a phenomenon of third world countries, or it is in bigger nations also. Yes, the corruption is more in third world countries. We can say that, but we cannot say that the corruption lacks in developed nations or in the first world countries. Only the mode of corruption is different. The citizens or the the stakeholders or the people involved are different. For example, in a country like United States, you cannot just cross a light and give $20 to the cop. Okay, that will not happen. So corruption is not at that level. The bureaucracy has evolved from that stage. The corruption, if it's happening, it may be happening at the level of Secretary of State or maybe President, something which the general masses are not very aware of. It's happening at a very high level. And that usually happens. Okay, there is this concept of overdeveloped state. Political science where people must have studied about Hamza Alvi and all. So what happens in third world countries, when the bureaucracy, the political class is given too much power, right? In other countries, nobody wants to get into administrative services. In United States, China, everybody wants to do business. Everybody wants to start their own startup because there is virtually no power with these bureaucrats. When everybody is following the laws, when you cannot take any bribes, when everything is already developed, you don't have to make any infrastructure, you don't have to be a policeman to do all those things, you don't have that danda raj, then you will not enjoy any power, right? You will not enjoy any authority. Then that job loses its lucrativeness, that that charm that civil services has here. That charm will only be there in areas where it's a career-based services. Like here, once you get in, nobody can remove you. And secondly, in areas where the developmental activities are still going on, there is a lot of fund in the hands of bureaucracy. There is a lot of respect enjoyed by the bureaucrats because they have a lot of power to make a difference. बाहर कुछ है ही नहीं, क्या change करेंगे वो लोग? वहाँ everything is either controlled by the top political class or the top business class, right? So corruption has evolved from that level to that level. Probably say after 50 years, or I think at least 100 for India, the corruption will maybe reach that level, and we may not see the kind of corruption or imagine the kind of corruption that we think in today's time. Okay, one of the reports I was reading of Transparency International, they said that the corruption has not really reduced in India, it's just that the politicians have become smarter. Okay, so now instead of a suitcase, they take money in Paytm, or maybe through Swiss accounts and the whole round tripping thing. The black money comes and it goes to some tax haven, and from that tax haven a shell company will be made. From that shell company FDI will come. ठीक है, and we are very happy FDI आ गया. वो यहीं से गया था, कहीं और से नहीं आया वो. So that is the whole idea about corruption. Yeah. Yes, we'll come to that. So red tapeism and the whole procedural aspect, when the procedure is so stringent, the person has to probably, if a person is traveling say 100 kilometers by 3 different transports and it takes him 5 hours or 4 hours to do so, and by the time he reaches the office is always closed. So he'll say, okay, I'll shell out 200 rupees and you do my work after 5 o'clock, okay. So at times this does happen, but we can't say, or we can't make an excuse out of it, that because the administrative procedure is so rigid, we can streamline it, but again, that cannot be something on which we can, maybe take corruption in a positive way, okay, that corruption may be done in these scenarios. We cannot justify corruption in any of those scenarios, although that is a big problem. So write down the causes. Yeah. No, what has happened in the developed countries? in India?
Yeah.
क्या नहीं हुआ इंडिया में ऐसा?
मतलब जैसे बाहर
Manufacturing some services, I mean agriculture some services में आ गए, we skip manufacturing sector. But if you analyze the whole process of administration in any country, like I had already explained, as the country evolves, the administrative procedures involve, right? Initially there may be a person who is handling all the files and there is too much autonomy with one individual. Now dhire dhire these 3Cs came up, those things reduced. Then eventually the economic aspect, now individuals, the literacy levels will rise. Now when people don't know that they really have to not pay 500 for a passport, you know, the system of corruption has been so institutionalized that people fear if the guy for verification of passport comes and he doesn't take money. And they're like, nahi banega passport. Kuch to problem hogi, like 500 bhi nahi leke gaya. I know my friends who got really worried because the inspector did not ask anything. Okay, so if that kind of a tendency is still there, then it is a problem, okay? And this will evolve as the literacy levels grow, as the developmental and growth of the economy grows, as the human developmental indexes increase, then gradually you won't worry about these things, alright? So likho, as per second ARC report, there are two major causes of corruption. Systemic and systematic. Now what is the difference between these two? The systemic is related to, the first one, is related to functioning of systems, which are political systems, economic systems, administrative systems, etc. Okay, and systematic on the other hand is corruption in an organized manner. That is institutionalized corruption. ठीक है? So basically there is one systemic, that is the political causes, the economic causes, the administrative causes, which are basically relating to these systems. The political systems have certain lacunas, the economic system have certain lacunas, and when these drawbacks or these small things are actually cashed upon is when corruption happens, because there are these small loopholes, like somebody had said that these loopholes are also, you know, used for indulging into corrupt activities. So systemic ho gaya, and then there is systematic. Systematic is that corruption is so institutionalized in certain areas that you really can't do anything. Like I gave this example of the passport thing, and certain other areas where you cannot really blame the system but probably an institution. For example, we can say that a lot of people feel that these RTOs and, you know, the driving license and all jahan banta hai, they have a lot of institutionalized corruption. It is very rare that you can get time-bound licenses or time-bound other documents without paying or without going through the route of all these middlemen and all, right? So these are the two types of corruption. So please use all these words. इस type से लिखोगे systemic, systematic, second ARC तो number मिलेंगे. Everybody is corrupt, this party corrupt, this PM corrupt, मोदी जी की गलती है, ये सब मत लिखना, ठीक है? So इसमें अब लिखो first political causes. Political causes. ठीक है, पॉलिटिकल कॉजेज में फर्स्ट पॉइंट आता है, ए करके लिख दो, ए, इलेक्टोरल करप्शन. So as we are aware that there is very high high volume of corruption or high volume of black money that flows in elections, especially when it is a national election. Okay, and this is something where much has not been able to be done, right? Electoral reforms are happening, a lot of things are happening, but yet the amount of corruption that is involved in elections is very, very, very high. The whole idea of electoral bonds, which have recently come up a lot, I mean, some of you might have read jo last to last budget mein introduced hua tha. But there is again a very, different kind of a view about it, whether it is really to reduce corruption or to make it even more easier for political parties to obtain funding. We'll discuss that in some other class. Write down something on this. Elections are one of the major arenas for flow of black money, which is attributed to corruption in several cases, Example, total fund spent by political parties in 2014 elections was 40,000 crores. Total funds spent by the political parties in the 2014 elections was 40,000 crores, out of which 5,000 crores was by donations. And the rest 35,000 crore was unaccountable black money. 35,000 crore was unaccounted black money. Okay, so you can see the kind of magnitude of black money that is prevalent in elections. Now, this was by one of the NGOs. I'll tell in the next class. Lok Niti was there, but I'll still confirm it. Second point, opportunistic politics, within quotes, opportunistic politics for personal gains, and not policy of principles, Okay, so often we see that a lot of opportunistic tasks are being done. The minister will try to serve his private ends using the public machinery. There was an example when during the UPA government, one of the telecom ministers was himself the owner of one of the media channels. Yes, Sun TV. Okay, so that surfaced into a big scam. So often they are using these political posts or their power for their own private ends. The other problem is nexus between political class, हाँ उसी के अंदर next point है, nexus between political class and corporate class. ठीक है. Now second point, big heading, administrative causes. इसमें first point is red tapeism and complex administrative procedures. Second point in this, lack of transparency in the functioning of the government. Lack of transparency in the functioning of the government. Third point, colonial legacy of corruption. Colonial legacy of corruption. Colonial legacy of corruption. Fourth, bureaucratic corruption. Bureaucratic corruption. Okay, so I've given just one word or one line on each one of them because you can elaborate on that. So, red tapeism and a very rigid administrative procedure often leads to corruption, like most of you understand, because if one file will be sent to 30 offices, then 30 times the same bribe has to be paid, right? So if we define clear roles, again, if we define clear responsibility and we streamline the administrative procedure, we know that I am the sole agency of issuing the passports, okay? I am the only one point of contact, or there are only 3 people involved in this activity, and the minimum people involved or the limited human interface that we have will ultimately reduce the corruption. If there are so many administrative procedures, if it is very complex, then obviously somewhere or the other there will be a loophole for the bureaucrats to make money. Okay, so we are not moral or ethical, right? That we have to accept. 99 out of the 100 people are not moral, are not corrupt by nature or by virtue. It's only if we stop that individual from being corrupt is how corruption can be tackled as per my view. Okay, and that can be done by taking multiple steps. Only one step will not, only introduction of GS4 ethics paper will not solve the purpose, okay. In fact, the people who score very high marks in ethics are the most unethical people in real life. Obviously, exceptions are there. Okay, so next point is, कौन सा लिखवाया next point? हाँ, first एक तो transparency था, red tapeism हो गया, then colonial legacy बताया था, right? So often we blame our colonial masters that Britishers के time पे there was very high corruption, and that corruption is continuing because most of us have, you know, taken up the same legacy, and the bureaucracy has been evolved from there only. पहले ICS था, वही Indian Civil Services, Imperial Civil Services, ultimately IS बन गया. So it is not our fault, हमारी कोई गलती नहीं है, वो दे गए corruption तो please आप British government के against जाके complain करो जो भी करनी है, although वहाँ कोई corruption नहीं है, okay? So they were the ones who probably brought in corruption here, and they have gone from here, they have evolved, they have very low levels of corruption, but we still have corruption, and we have one entity or one person or one organization or one rather country to blame, that is the colonial masters. Very easy. Okay? Next is economic causes. Within economic causes you can write down इसमें थोड़ा segregate कर सकते हो. You can segregate this into pre-91 era and post-91. I am assuming you know what happened in 91. Okay. So in pre-91 era you can write, very briefly I am telling you the important things, you can elaborate them on your own. Excessive regulation and license raj, excessive regulations and license raj had led to crony socialism, crony, C-R-O-N-Y, crony. Excessive regulations and license raj had led to crony, C-R-O-N-Y, crony socialism, which was a major cause of corruption at that point of time. ठीक है, तो pre-91 era में the problem was there was so many regulations and the whole licensing ideology and the whole excessive controlling by the government, which led to a lot of corruption. Why I have used this term crony socialism? You have heard of the term of crony capitalism. Crony capitalism is what? Yeah, nexus between the political class and the corporate class. At that point of time, there was not much of corporate class, okay, hardly a bunch of corporates. And the mode of economy or the mode of governance at that point of time was mostly socialistic. Yet, there was some kind of collusion that was happening between some of the corporates and the kind of controlling power the government had, which led to crony socialism. Okay. Second, in post 91, you can write post 91, it has been mainly within quotes corruption of resources, example spectrum, minerals, coal, minerals में आ गया ना, spectrum, minerals, etc. Okay, so now it was mostly the resources that the government had at their disposal, how they allocated these resources. The resources may be monetary resource which had to go for a certain scheme of health or education, or a resource in terms of spectrum allocation or a mineral allocation, or some other commodity that the government had with them to give away. These kind of resources now created a corruption kind of a scenario where they had the autonomy to distribute these goods and services among the people or among the corporates. Okay, so there are three areas identified for major corruption in this post 91 era. Three major areas. एक तो है यही resources या minerals वाला, the one we have talked about. Minerals लिख दो इसको. Minerals. Second is real estate. And third, defense. Okay. So all three, you understand how corruption happens in all these three areas. And these were the three major sectors or three major areas where most corruption has been seen in the past years post 91. Okay. So these are roughly the economic causes. The next fourth heading you can give is social and cultural causes. Social and cultural causes. So you feel there is any social or cultural cause that leads to corruption? हाँ, dowry, okay. Yeah, कुछ बोला some? Feudal system, yes, okay. So culture. Okay, so giving bribe to God. Okay, I don't think that is a form of corruption, but okay. The mentality, okay, the mentality is there, correct. So, yes, what he wants to refer is the first point that we will write. Corruption is a way of life in the Indian society, right? Corruption is a way of life in the Indian society. Corruption is a way of life in the Indian society. We have accepted it. Yeah, it corrodes the social fabric, बिल्कुल ठीक कह रहे हो आप. But there is a lot of acceptance of corruption. We don't really feel bad about it. वो हो रहा है तो हो रहा है, right? If somebody is giving a 200 rupee or 300 rupee bribe to somebody, you will certainly not be shocked. I mean, it's a very day-to-day scenario, and this brings us to the second point, right? There is no emphatic जो भी बोलते हैं से EMPATHIC, 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 empathic anger, EMPATHIC, empathic anger against corruption. So this meaning of this empathic anger is that we do not inherently feel angry at instances of corruption. Maybe our blood boils when something happens to our community, or there may be a, if somebody is eating beef is a bigger issue in a village and we lynch that person. But if somebody is indulging into a scam or has probably massive assets which they should not possess and they get arrested, we burn ourselves. Okay? No names taken, no instances. But there have been instances in our country where people with great difficulty, extreme difficulty, have been arrested under Prevention of Corruption Act for having disproportionate assets, but the masses go crazy, okay? When their own money has been taken by that politician, okay? The whole sarees and sandals and number of houses have been bought by that same money and you're burning yourself. So that is the value of human life, okay? There is no emphatic, जो भी बोलते हैं इसे, emphatic anger against this, okay? And this type of anger is pretty different in different types of countries, okay? Some people might treat corruption with, a lot of anger. It may be a menace for the society in certain areas. In the Scandinavian countries, if you go, Norway, Sweden, they have almost zero corruption and zero tolerance towards corruption. They will not bear corruption. I mean, probably their lynching will happen if somebody is doing a corrupt activity and maybe not eating beef, or for that matter the entire cow itself, okay? So that is something which we can attribute to social and cultural reasons. One more point you can write in this. There is acceptance of corruption, within quotes. There is acceptance of corruption, within quotes, as a necessary evil, as a necessary evil. There is acceptance of corruption as a necessary evil. Most of you would agree on this, that a lot of us feel that it is an evil, but maybe somehow it is there in the society and it is really difficult to eradicate. Since it is there on almost every level, from grassroots to say top level, solving the issue of corruption also becomes a challenge. So at times we just accept it as a necessary evil, and rather than fighting it, we move on to other things, right? So when we discuss the solutions of fighting corruption, we'll discuss how to tackle with this problem. Now, one small thing we'll just do before we end is outcomes of corruption. What are the outcomes of corruption? इसमें first point लिखो, rent seeking attitude. रेंट जो पे करते हो ना सब, रेंट सीकिंग एटीट्यूड. Rent seeking attitude. Write down in this. It is the money for doing the job/duty by the officials from the public. Job/duty by the officials from the public. Okay, so there is this attitude now among the bureaucrats or maybe the lower level civil servants where they feel that it is their right to take money from you. Okay, this rent seeking attitude has come in. Now there is not a problem then when you are paying that amount to get something done. That is a normal thing. Okay, that has normally been accepted. 10 people in the queue, 9 are doing that. Now that one person who is not doing it, the person behind the window will be like, okay, that he is demanding it as a right, that he should be given that. So this rent seeking attitude is developed in the bureaucracy for doing their work. When they are already being paid their salaries, high or low is a very different issue. Okay, kam hai, zyada hai, whether they should get that or the perks or whatever they are getting is a different issue. But they cannot accept or they cannot ask for a bribe as a matter of right. Okay, for doing their official duty for which they are being appointed by the government, they are being paid by the government. Second point, quid pro quo. सुना होगा किसी ने तो, quid pro quo. So what is quid pro quo? Yes. You do something for me, I'll do something for you. Okay, there are a lot of different ways to express this. So this leads to collusion and nexus. This leads to collusion and nexus for mutual benefits. This leads to collusion and nexus for mutual benefit. Collusion and nexus for mutual benefits. So obviously there is a quid pro quo involved always in corruption. If you are paying me 500, in return I'll do your work. Or if you are not paying me, then I'll probably do something else for you, right? So ये वो जो एक aspect आ जाता है, that this again we'll discuss in deontology, that if you are doing something X for me, I'll do Y in return for you. When it should only be do Y, because it is a duty that you are performing, and there should not be any reason for you to do it or not do it. If it is right, you have to do it. Okay. So this is the quid pro. Then next point is international perception. International perception gets negatively affected. International perception gets negatively affected if there is high level of corruption in a country. If there is high level of corruption in a country. India's rank in the corruption perception index, CPI, corruption perception index. India's rank in the corruption perception index. Who gives the corruption perception index? Transparency International. What is the rank of India? 81 out of 180 countries. ठीक है, roughly 100 countries तो हैं ही हमारे पीछे. 81 out of 180. Okay, so this in turn, the next point is an outcome of this point only. Corruption negatively affects the investment climate. Negatively affects the investment climate of a country. Investment climate of a country. So what is this investment climate? Yeah, FDIs, foreign funds which are flowing, the investors who want to come and set up their, industries through FDI route or through maybe FIIs, they do not get attracted because they know that their money is not safe in this country. They have to pay a lot of bribes. So probably an investment of 100 rupees which would on paper bring them or get them 500 rupees would not actually be true because there is about 300 rupees of corruption involved in between. Okay, so it negatively impacts the image of the country and ultimately reduces the investments which were intended to come. Otherwise, a country like India, which is growing, magnanimously, and there has been so much of potential and the almost double-digit growth rates were closely achieved, could have attracted a lot of FDI. But then again, the image, there is this S&P and all these Moody's, they rate the country, okay, based on all these factors. So India has always been on A minus, B plus wala range. Okay, so that obviously impacts the image of the country. The next is growth and GDP. Growth and GDP are also negatively affected. Growth and GDP are also negatively affected due to presence of a parallel economy. Due to presence of a parallel economy. What is this parallel economy? Black money. So had this money been channelized into the right areas, or if it was invested through the right routes, or if this was white money, it would have showed in these numbers, the GDP, the economy, the growth, whatever is missing there is mostly because there is a parallel economy which is unaccounted for, right? So corruption does this to the country. So these are the major outcomes. In the next class we'll discuss how to solve corruption, and we'll do the topic role of civil services in India. Thank you. Your answers are not checked. Most likely I'll bring them tomorrow or on Monday.